one of the things we're told happened Sunday after the killing of Osama Bin Laden is that the team that was in the compound in Pakistan was able to take away a great pile of information. I guess people have been going over it. Has there been anything that's come out of that raid that you've had to respond to change the security posture here in the United States?
No. First of all, we're always at an elevated security posture, an alert security posture. And so that is part of the DNA of the country now and will remain so, because even with bin Laden's death, there are others out there who will seek to harm us. And so we're always leaning forward in that respect. But as of right now, when this show is being taped, there is nothing we have that would present a specific, credible, direct threat to the United States that is an imminent threat.
So you haven't had to change the posture in ports, in airports, in places where people gather, train stations, so far?
Not generally. Now, some localities did, as to be very conservative, and in point of fact, we did put some additional people in the airports and some other places in particular for a few days until the situation settled down. But in terms of what we know and the intel received since the death of bin Laden, there's no specific or credible threat, just a general feeling that at some point something might happen.
The ongoing debate about how to deal with terrorism and face it in the world, about how to protect ourselves against it here in the United States, has sometimes gotten conflated, tied up with the conversation around illegal immigration. People running for public office around the country have spoken about the southern border as a conduit for entry of people who wish to do the United States harm. In this era, we're now almost 10 years from 9/11, have there been crossings that your department, the FBI, other parts of the security effort of the United States, have identified as people who are terrorists or part of terrorist organizations?
Well, we get into matters of definition. We have people in the United States who have crossed illegally. We have people who came legally and then stay past the period of their visas. And in both kinds of instances, we're constantly looking to identify those individuals and remove them from the country. And to the extent we have some who are associated with other groups or even with other transnational groups, yes, there have been some, but it's by no means 100% of the problem.
Well, is it more likely to be landscapers, drywallers, and people who tend cherry trees in western Michigan, or people who are part of international terrorist plots? I mean, this has become part of the conversation. They've become intertwined.
Yes, and the vast majority of individuals who are crossing the land border between Mexico and the United States are crossing either to work or to join a family member who is here to work.
What's the National Terrorism Advisory System, NTAS? It's new to your department. It's being rolled out and implemented around the country. Let's understand better what it is.
What it is a substitute for the old color codes, which didn't communicate any information. Under the NTAS system, we start, as I said before, at an elevated baseline. We just assume risk as part of the ecology, if you will, the environment in which we live today. Then we review on an ongoing basis intel received, and if there is a specific credible threat, then we can issue an alert which tells people the facts of the threat as much as we can, what they need to do to prepare themselves and their family, what they can do to help the government if we're looking for something in particular, and how they can keep updated on the status of the threat. And then those advisories, if they are issued, expire on their own within 2 weeks unless there's a decision by the intelligence community that they need to be continued.
So when I go to a train station or an airport, I won't hear over the PA system that the threat level is now orange, which I never knew what that meant anyway.
That's exactly the point, that orange became ubiquitous. Nobody knew what it meant. It didn't communicate information. We think people need information.
The Secure of 2006 Do we have a secure fence on the southern border of the United States?
We have a system at the southern border of the United States, part of which includes fencing. The Congress has appropriated enough money to build 620 some odd miles of fence. All but 2 miles of that is actually complete. But in addition to that, we have stationed at the border a record number of Border Patrol agents and some amazing new technologies which give those agents greater coverage ability than they had before.
Because there are very commonly heard complaints about the state of that project, that there were standards that were supposed to be met by the new construction on the border that simply were not met, that we built things that did not live up to the ambitions of that bill.
Well, let me begin by saying, look, I was the governor of Arizona at the time that bill was passed, and before then I was the Attorney General, and before then I was the United States Attorney. I've done prosecuted tunnel cases, and I've seen ladders. In fact, the phrase I use is, if you build a 12-foot fence, I'll show you a 13-foot ladder. A fence alone is not enough. It can help in the sense of helping guide where illegal traffic goes, and that aids us in apprehension, but in and of itself, a fence is not adequate.
So today, are there fewer people crossing? When they cross, are they more likely to be apprehended? If they are apprehended, are they more likely to be sent home? What's the state of play on the southern border?
Yes, yes, yes. There are fewer people crossing, and we can measure that a number of ways. But the best way is just to talk to people who live along the border and in border communities, and they'll tell you it's far different than it was even a few years ago. Apprehensions at the border are down. Even in the busiest sector, which is called the Tucson sector, they're down 36, 37% over what they were a year ago. And they're down, they're less than half of what they were 5 years ago. So and apprehensions, when they're down, that's a symbol that attempts are also down. And then when we apprehend people, in all but a few cases, they will face consequences that are much more serious than simply doing catch and release. We've ended catch and release.
Catch and release being just taking them to the other side of the border and letting them go to try to cross again?
Yes, that doesn't happen. We are not doing that anymore.
But, you know, this is not a single variable problem. The United States economy also went through a terrible time. Were crossings down because people were less likely to find work on this side of the border, or because they were much more afraid of being caught?
You know, I think that's one of those questions that we'll probably never have one answer to. Crossings started going down before the recession, so there definitely was some impact about the additional resources at the border. We have now poured resources into the southwest border in a way never before seen in our country's history, and I think that combined with the depth of the recession has had an overall impact.
A lot of these conversations begin with elected officials from the southwest part of the country saying, border security first. We can't talk about immigration reform until we do border security first. You're the Secretary of Homeland Security. What do you tell them? We did it already?
No, I say they are related. And immigration reform includes things like visa reform, which, if reformed, would have the effect of placing more people coming through the actual ports of entry, so we know who they are and where they're going. They have a limited time to stay in the United States. We improve our interior enforcement so that we have more efforts against the so-called visa overstays. And we continue to sustain our record efforts at the border. That is the immigration debate that the country ought to have.
So they're tied to each other and have to be done in concert with each other rather than one than the other? That's
right, because we have done so much at the southwest border that now, you know, the marginal benefit of doing more is in and of itself tied to what else are we doing in the interior of the country, and what are we doing in terms of legal immigration as well as illegal immigration.